Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. Quite a dull weekend, I guess. But there's lots to talk.
Hold on a minute. You're looking a bit tired. I mean, we're a day late. I mean, I don't know what you've been doing that we're making this podcast. You're looking a bit weary, Paul. What have you been up to?
Do you know what? For the last day and a half, this is why we're late. Right. I've been calculating. I've been putting through the supercomputer all these crunching all the numbers, what the possibilities are of Max Verstappen not winning the 2022.
And what did this incredibly in-depth research sort of? What was the result? Are we going to shock? You're going to shock us all now?
Yeah, I think everybody would be quite shocked because there is absolutely no chance whatsoever of him not winning the 2022 Drivers' Championship, and quite a well-deserved one as well. There's not much.
You can wrap it up this weekend, can't you? I think. What does the computer say? Did you work out which Grand Prix you can mathematically?
Yeah, he can actually mathematically win this weekend. I don't think he will, because Charles will probably give him a little bit of a run for his money with the next, at least one more race. But no, it's one of the most dominant title wins ever. He's probably going to get the record of the most wins of the season as
most
well.
wins,
yeah, good on him, Max.
Highly deserved from him and Red Bull.
Yeah, I agree.
But not much other. Quiet week, wasn't it?
Well, you say that. There's a bit of driver change though, Tiff, in Formula One.
Well, Guan Yu Zhao is confirmed, but we pretty much knew that all along. And the FIA have officially rejected Colton's super license.
Ridiculous. Stupid, crazy, nuts.
On Twitter, they all seem to be agreeing. Well, Twitter, they all seem to be agreeing with this.
No, he's a seven-time IndyCar winner. He's one of the world's.
The point is, I think a lot of people would say, he's not the best American. He only qualified 10th in the IndyCar. The point is, IndyCar is dominated by Penske and the other mob. And the Andretti, the Andretti drivers were 9th and 10th. That's the best they could do with Andretti cars. And the point is, even if he comes to the year, because Red Bull wanted him, it's not like he's buying his way in. And if he doesn't do well in 1 year, then fair enough. But it'd be a great experiment, which has now been taken away, and we'll probably never see him in Formula One. 1 year would have been great,
I agree with you. And then, for the first time, I think for a long time, if not ever, we've got a direct comparison with a top IndyCar driver and into Formula One. Look at Lando Norris. Lando Norris is going to finish about 10th. And he's an exceptional driver. So it's not just about the driver, it's about that.
Exactly, yeah. Lando's only 10th. Lando's only 10th to the championship. He must be rubbish. He's only 10th to the championship.
Which is silly. Talking about exceptional drivers, 3 exceptional Formula One drivers have got all something in common. Nicholas Latifi, Michael Schumacher, and Lewis Hamilton. It's the number 7. So Schumacher and Hamilton, 7 world titles, and Latifi, 7 points. That's
cruel. Moving on. He was good in F2. He won F2 races. He was, he's a very good driver, but just not brilliant, not good enough. One great driver retiring, saying he's not going back to Indigo, Jimmy Johnson. I met at Goodwood. He was racing at Goodwood and racing the Galaxy and a Cobra, I think. A charming bloke. A lot of chatting to him about NASCAR, and he did 2 years in IndyCar bravely at the age of about 42 or 3, having raced NASCAR all his life. Absolutely charming bloke. So I wish him well. He's going to still compete in something. He's just not sure what yet.
Okay. Well, but I did just mention Latifi. Of course, he is officially leaving. We probably knew that for some time, but leaving Williams. So a few drivers going. And what will Latifi do? Has it been announced? Has he said?
He'll probably go IndyCar, I would have thought. I've seen no reason. If he loves racing, maybe he's bored with racing. He might give up and be a farmer or something. I don't know. I don't know what Daddy's money's in. He might go work for Daddy. I mean, Daddy's.
Why can't we get some of this money? Why can't someone feel sorry for us? We're finishing off this second series of our TV show. For those of you that are interested. It has been. It's just when I want to watch.
You've sold the mirror. I mean, normally you have that very expensive mirror behind you. Have you flogged that off to get some money?
I've flogged everything. So I live in a little seaside town in the southwest of England called Clevedon, as you know, Tiff. It's a lovely little Victorian seaside town. I see them filming there often. They're always filming. They were filming a children's BBC sketch. One part of this CBBC, so a children's TV thing. There were 60, 70 people there. For one, I said, what are they doing? Holding an ice cream. Someone takes the ice cream, runs off. That was it. Lorries, Arctics everywhere. We go out filming. We have 1 or 2 people. That's it. I mean, it's I can't believe it. But we're getting there. We're almost there. We're going to have series 2 of Lovecars on the road. TV show out very soon. And then next year, we've got a super exciting project, but we have to rely on sponsors, which we don't really have very many of. So if you know any, please let us know. Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
We'd love you.
Yeah,
we go from Lovecars to loving you.
In terms of world, let's have a quick chat. There were some races going on.
Yeah, it was a quiet season. A lot of motorbike racing, Moto GPs and World Superbikes, British Superbikes. Lots of drama in the British Superbikes. We might come to later. And the biggest subject that was back on Twitter big time was after the BTCC at Silverstone on the stupid circuit, the national circuit. We used to call it the club circuit. Track limits, really, it's under, big time. Because I was watching on the telly. And Cops, the only fast corner on the whole circuit, the only really challenging corner, they all go off wide. The road everywhere. Just 3 cars wide, 2 cars wide. And it sounded like to me like some censorship because all the support races, they were banging out penalties. And we'll go back to that again later because you're a fan of the 5-second penalties, but then at the end of the race, nobody has won. There was a great Porsche race, which down to the last corner, the last lap, the guy that led across the line had got 2 track limits, had the 5 seconds. So it was the guy that's second that won. But if you're in the grandstand, you haven't got good hearing to the PA system, and you're not, linked into the TV. As a spectator, you'd think that the guy that crossed the line first had won the race. So that's why I'm worried about, the option of time limits. But it was but when it comes to all the support races, they were getting penalties. And lo and behold, the BTCC, I even tried to wave up Tim Harvey on Twitter to reply. He wouldn't answer. They didn't mention the track, and it was appalling. It was just a joke. I won't name all the drivers, but one in particular, the opening lap, made up 2 places around the outside off the grid because he just deliberately shot out wide. And the guys keeping the tighter line came out of the corner slower. And there was a lot of banging them. It was like a banger race because that's what the stupid little track almost encourages, because it's too tight for 30 touring car drivers in equally powered cars with equal ambitions and also very little jeopardy in terms of banging into each other. But yeah, there was no mention of track limits. Everyone Twitter's up in arms. Jade Edwards, bless her, was the only driver to sort of come back on the Twitter to say she actually said to the stewards when she was in the office for another era, that, well, where were the track limits? And the stewards said, no, there weren't many. But quite obviously, someone had said, look, it's going to be too hard to police, let them go. And I almost tweeted, because remember NASCAR and IndyCar, when they go to the Circuit of Americas, they don't have track limits. And so that penultimate corner, very fast corner, everyone just almost right out wide. And of course, then you're taking yourself very near the barrier, which you were taken away from by them putting the car park in. So I actually said maybe for Cops Corner next year, we just take up the curb, just leave the car park. Why not?
Of course you can't. Then they're going to, and then they're going to go further to the left, aren't they?
And then when they lose control, they'll hit the wall hard.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll realise why they've been given the safety of a car park to be observed, because the big car park is there to slow you down before you hit something.
So I am in favour of the 5-second in race penalties. I am, because once it keeps going.
I'm glad you said that.
It keeps going, they will stop doing it. Simple as that. And it will only be the errors that do that. However, what I do encourage is consistency. So they can't have all the other races enforcing that. They're not doing it. It's all about consistency. As long as they're consistent.
I think you need a loop. I don't know how well, because Brands Hatch has got a loop in that bottom bend.
We're recording a podcast, Elliot. I'll call you back.
We're busy. You have to have a loop maybe where the curb is, so the carbs have to. But of course, then you have this thing where I was pushed over it. So there's the appeal, But I think if you're in a real race on a real track with grass on the edge, and you happen to get pushed off into the grass, you'll lose 2 places while you try to recover.
Yeah.
You can't ever claim them back.
No.
So I think even if you were pushed off, you might have put yourself in a position to be pushed off because you're trying to go around the outside of someone. So you've got to understand that, going around the outside isn't as easy. But, I don't think you can claim, I was pushed off. Because like I said, if you're on a grass track, if you're pushed off, you'll lose naturally. But the Extreme E, the only other big four-wheel event going on was the electric go-karts, electric beach buggies, they called. It was the Copper X-Prix in Venezuela, which is a copper mine, which apparently has sustainable mining. Therefore, it was worth highlighting how they sustainably mine copper
They hit all the 10-year-olds, did they?
So,
I shouldn't have said that.
I watched a lot of it. I watched a lot of it at times 30, and I watched the final, and it was all chaos, the whole thing, because it was a very wide open track. But the only way of delineating the track was to have marker posts. Guess what? If you hit a marker post, you get a 5-second penalty, because they were all hitting the marker posts. Because they're blinded by the dust of the day. It was quite spectacular stuff. They're all sliding. And of course, the commentary of always, they just go non-stop. Just the male guy, the man and the woman. And he's one runs out of breath, the other slams. They're overtaking down the inside. No, she's not. Yes, they are going down the inside. No, they're not. It's not. Anyway, for once, the commentary team was silenced, because at the end of the final race, they said, but we're not actually sure who's the winner, because we think he got 5 seconds and he got 5 seconds. They got 5 seconds. And the most annoying thing with their commentary, they describe the cars in three manners. Sometimes they'll say the number of the car, the number 44. Then they'll say the team. So it's the Hamilton team's ahead of the other team. And then they'll say the name of the drive. But of course, in each 4-lap race, one driver does 2 laps. So I'm never quite sure who they're talking about in each car, and the McLaren car. Anyway, so finally, due to track limit penalties of 5 seconds for this and that, even the ever-talking commentators were silenced. So I know what you mean. If you keep on doing the 5 seconds, eventually people will realise, we can't. But I think still, to the outside spectator of the grandstand, like that Porsche race, really tight, 2 cars battling for the lead. And the people in the grandstand, might have thought the one that crossed the line won the race, which doesn't happen.
My analogy that I gave you last week was football and rugby. We're both sports fans of everything. The referee says something in rugby, they know that they have to listen, and that's discipline. And football is getting better because now they're still a bit cheekier. Soccer, for those of you in America, but and it will happen. It will take a while, but it will happen, and then people will know they can't do it because it's 5 seconds.
So I think I'm still a drop back a place man, but you've all had radios at work. This is the problem. It's got to be someone with authority. But when the touring cars come round on the set, and there's 6 cars all miles off track, someone's got to note all the numbers down. But there must be an electronic response. We've got the transponders. So you must be able to say, right, those 6 were all over the line. Get on the radio. They've all got to drop 1 place back.
It's hard, isn't it? It would be hard. Look, and a lot of it is so subjective as well. The amount of times that I have gone into a steward's room after a race saying, he ran me off the road or whatever. Well, not that I've never gone in there and said he's done something. I've taken it on the chin. But when you've been called in, you have to explain something. And hang on a minute, he did that to me, not the other way around. It's funny how people see it, isn't it? It's amazing, really. So what else is going on? So track limits. Let us know what you think if you're listening to this on a podcast. Try and jump onto Twitter or YouTube and just let us know in the comments. We'd love to know what you all think about track limits, because
I think a lot of people dig up the car park and put gravel. Seems to be one of the most popular.
They tried that at Spa with the fake gravel, which I thought was a great idea, but didn't seem like it was maybe greasy.
That was Zandvoort.
Zandvoort, thank you. Yes, it was.
The trouble is, the faster corners at Spa, they put the gravel tracks, but they still had 2 cars' widths worth of tarmac, because because as soon as you get a car trapped in the gravel on the exit of a corner, you have to red flag it, because they're stuck in the gravel right next to the circuit.
I've been there many times.
But I still remember that when they made the very first new Cops corner, which was a tight right, and they did have gravel right to the edge of the track, and the touring car race, we were in the Nissans, 3 Nissans, all sponsored in the same lovely red colours of Old Spice, splash it on. And there was mayhem, the whole field. I think one went wide, none of us could see. We all went in too quick. And I hit another car that was already beached, and someone hit me. But all 3 of the Old Spice Nissans were stuck in the gravel. And the Nissan Hospitality's bus was on the inside of Cops Corner, and all 3 drivers walked across the track and went and had a beer in the sponsors.
Did you get beaten by the brute?
We got brutally beaten. So if you have gravel right on the edge of the track, it's just each corner needs a different blooming cure. Yeah. Anyway, let's see what everyone's. Back to proper racing. And when you talk about Moto GPs and World Superbikes, there was all last weekend. There was proper racing. As I said, with huge drama, we get to Alton Park and the British thing. British Superbikes. But Moto GP it was all a bit turned on its head because it was a wet qualifying. And so all the bike, they had about one dry session on Motegi track, which not all the riders had ridden round. So on the wet conditions, Marc Marquez on his second race back on this Honda that's a rubbish bike at the moment, has been trailing in 14th and 15th, puts it on pole position, dropped to 5th early on with the dry track in the race and came back to 4th, took 4th place. So wonderful to have Marc Marquez back. Jack Miller, an outsider now because he's been dropped by Ducati, but he's going to KTM next year, the Australian. He came through from 7th on the grid to win, just stormed through everyone, just had his whole Ducati fired up. Whilst the championship contenders, Bagnaia and Quartararo and Bastianini, they were all battling like mad. They were 7th place. They were just nowhere. And in fact, Bastianini on the last lap dived to try and do Quartararo and dropped it, but also another no points for the Ducati man who was on his way, who'd been catching Quartararo.
Yeah, but you know what it's like when you get into a battle wherever you are, you just slow each other up. So
yeah. They weren't getting it. But worse, Alex Espargaro on the Aprilia, the other of the sort of, he's third in the championship. He went out on the grid for the green flag lap, opened up the throttle, and they found that the engine was in eco mode. And he spent the whole lap trying to get it going, couldn't. Came in at the end of the green flag lap and just jumped onto the spare bike, which had the wrong tyres on, and dressed up. And he got back to 16th, I think, in the end. So he got no points. So a lot of drama. Cal Crutchlow, our British rider, temporarily back with Moto GP and the Yamaha. They qualified 23rd, came up to 15th. So Cal's had 2 steady rides. And I think he might be out in Thailand or might not be if he's going to lose his ride. But so good to have Cal back in Moto GP. But big dramas. Now there's 4 rounds to go. I mean, there's hardly any points now at the top. So it's really tight. So really exciting in the Moto GP.
But the races are exciting. The championship is exciting.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Moto 2, Jake Dixon, another great race. In fact, he was in the news today. He qualified 2nd, but then he came 3rd because someone who had got track limits lost his track limits and came back to 2nd, again, causing confusion. He dropped back to 9th, an awful opening lap in the dry. But as Jake always does, second half of the race, he was getting the pace up and he got back to 4th, nearly right on the back wheel of the third guy was in 3rd. We had another leader crashing out in Moto GP. In fact, this was Moto 2, but Aaron Canet, who was on pole position, had a nice lead, just pushing too hard. But it was huge joy in Japan because Ai Ogura came from 13th on the grid to win. And he narrows the championship gap there. Moto 2, he's just 2 points now behind Spain's Augusto Fernandez. So Moto 2 exciting. And Jake Dixon today announced got another year in Moto 2 with his team.
That's good news.
Yeah, so if he could step up, win the title next year, we might have a Pucca Moto GP drive. Not that Cal isn't a Pucca Moto GP, but he's not likely to be employed full time. So that was a good in Moto 2. Then the Brits in Moto 3, we had this incredible wet session where this vision track, these 2 young British riders, Scott Ogden put it 2nd on the grid. Track he'd never been to before. In the one dry session, he was about 23rd fastest. And it was wet. And he just, every session in the wet, he was just there on the pace, qualified 2nd. You can see on the grid, he was so nervous, poor lad, on the front of the grid. And he did drop. He only dropped back steadily. And he was about, I think it was 5th at the end of the first lap. But sadly, he went sailing straight on and into the dirt on one lap. I don't know what happened. He ran off and he finished 20th. But I mean, just for the kid as a rookie, I mean, I've used that as experience, now he's done it, when he's got, But whereas Josh Watley, his teammate, was taken out. He's getting quicker now. He's getting to Scott's times. He was up in 23rd, 4th. He was taken out on the first lap for the second Grand Prix running. So he had a very short race.
And like I've said many times before, it's not just the driver; it's all the team and your fans and your family, everybody watching as well. Yeah. Tiff, do you get nervous still on the grid? Sort of
always terrible, especially when you're sharing a car with the owner. Sharing a £1 million Jaguar type. You want to race, but you don't want to damage it. But no, always nervous. I don't think you can't be a racing driver and not. The other Brit, John McPhee, qualified 12th and finished 7th. So McPhee had a steady run. Whereas Spain's Izan Guevara had his 5th win of the year, and he's rushing away. MotoGP, Moto 3 title pretty much in his pocket.
Good. So, and good for your pronunciation as well. I wish I had your pronunciations.
I'm trying.
Yesterday I had to drive, as you know, the DBX 707 round a track, and it was just quite phenomenal, really. But I had to pronounce the Ferrari Puro Sangue. But it's so hard to do because you're speaking English and you've got
Ferrari. What was that? The Ferrari SUV?
Yeah,
I didn't even know the word.
I thought it was called Persang, but I looked at the phonetic pronunciation. It's Porosange, and you sound such a plonker, but you're very good with your pronunciation.
Trying. So, Moto GP, really good weekend in Japan. World Superbikes quieter really done in Barcelona because Alvaro Bautista, the Ducati Championship leader, won all three of the races. Whereas the chasers, Razgatlioglu and Jonathan Rea, they had a podium each, 2 podiums for Toprak and only 1 for Rea. With 4 rounds to go now, Bautista's 60 points ahead. So he's looking good for the World Superbikes. But the British Superbikes was the drama of the weekend. I mean, terrifying drama. They're now into their top 8 showdown. So they're a bit like NASCAR.
Was it Donington, wasn't it?
It was Alton Park.
Alton
Park.
Which
always looks scary to me.
Donington next week for British Superbikes.
Yeah, so where this will continue.
Yeah.
But it's the McCams Yamaha team. So they're the reigning champions with Taz McKenzie, won it last year. He was injured, I think, in a training bike. I'm pretty sure he's injured not racing, but on off-roading for fun. And his teammate, Jason O'Halloran, he led the championship earlier on until Ray... Get the names right now. Ray. What's Ray's first name?
Jonathan, isn't it?
No, that's the other Ray. It's the other thing. Bradley Ray.
Bradley
Ray got his Yamaha going because we saw him at Thruxton. There's amazing. So the 3 Yamaha boys they were dominating. They're the top 3 in the top 8. So we're going to the shootout period. They call it showdown, not shootout. The showdown, which is 3 rounds and 9 races. Anyway, race number 1. I don't know who went down first. I think it was Taz came down first. So first of all, Taz McKenzie drops it going into that hairpin, Shell hairpin, it used to be called, right at the bottom of the big Alton Park. He dropped it on his own, went in too quick, bike in the barrier, he was okay. So that was one Yamaha out. Then that was a red flag, not red for pace car. On the restart, Jason O'Halloran, who was running second, I think, also third, was taken out by Peter Hickman at Druids Corner. Now, I say taken out, this is where the controversy all begins, because Hickman dived up the inside into Druids, when in fact wasn't mentioned by the expert analysts when we discussed this later, James Hayden and Jamie Whittam, because Bradley Ray had overtaken O'Halloran exactly that spot. So basically, Peter Hickman tried to do the same. Now, Peter Hickman's not in the top 8, so can't win the championship. So the fact that he was, he just actually got the fastest lap. And after he said, well, I'm trying to win the race. But the expert said it was completely Hickman's fault. Now, I don't know bikes, but O'Halloran leaning in caught the back of Hickman's bike. So Hickman had already gone 2/3 of a bike length past up the inside, but obviously had pushed O'Halloran out slightly. Now, maybe on a bike, you can't stand it up easy. You can't avoid people once you've leant in. But the impact was on O'Halloran's handlebar into Hickman's rear end. Anyway, huge shunt. That's a flipping quick corner. And Hickman was blamed and he was penalised by the stewards. They was raging about it. And then we go into race 2. Oh, my goodness. So I don't know which came first in that one either. So it was the first one was Taz McKenzie, again, now back on his bike, drops it in the bottom chicane where they're braking after the back straight and gets run over by poor old Peter Hickman. So that was a red flag. Luckily, I think it's pretty bad leg injuries, but he was run over his legs, and I think he's broken his femur. So Taz McKenzie, the reigning champion, he puts it in the barriers in race 1. He's then run over an accident. So he dropped it. It was his own fault. So O'Halloran is now, he's had his outing. He's back in the race again. And Tommy Bridewell tries the same overtaking manoeuvre into Druids Corner on O'Halloran with the same result. Now, O'Halloran, for the second race running, is cartwheeling through the Druids thing. Now, this one, Tommy Bridewell, it was more side-by-side a clash. So he wasn't as far through as Hickman was. But the analysts, Jamie Whittam and James Hayden, were just raging at the riders, the overtaking riders, being at fault. Whereas the sort of racing driver was thinking, well, hold on, he was through.
Alongside, yeah.
And interesting, both Hickman and then Bridewell. Hickman just said, well, I'd been lining him up because he was slow. That part of the track he was slow at. He was always slow there. And it was the last lap, trying to get to the podium. So I made the move. I thought I got through, and then he hit the back of me. But the stewards did him, and I dropped him on the grid for the second race. And Tommy Bridewell, he went a bit further. He said, I've been following him. He was slow there. Bearing in mind that Bradley Ray overtook him at this place, it would seem that O'Halloran is slow into Druid's corner. But Bridewell, for some reason, decided to stir it up a bit, saying, you're not a real superbike rider if you can't go quick through Old Hall, not Lodge. What's the hill called? Over the hill and into Druids. So virtually saying O'Halloran's not good enough to be a superbike rider when he's won motor races. So that stirred it all up. I don't know. And after the next red flag,
there's a bit of handbags.
And Tommy Bridewell went on to win the third race and put him into second in the points now. So Bradley Ray won the first race, but he had problems with his tyres and had a third and a fifth the next two races. But boy, there was some damage done. I think McCann's Yamaha might not even turn up at Donny's. I mean, they got one very injured rider, and O'Halloran was limping away like bad. I mean, them bike boys, I mean, they're tough. Yeah. There was another red flag with another big shunt at the first chicane after the shell hairpin, with some other lad getting hurt quite badly. So our well wishes to all those superbike riders that were injured at Alton Park. Because, I mean, that's a hell of a track. It's a hell of a track in a car.
It's bad enough in a car.
It's Clay Hill. You come over Clay Hill. That's where they were saying O'Halloran wasn't as quick as the others. But it is an overtaking place, as Bradley Ray proved. It's not as if it's a place you don't overtake. Yeah. But I was surprised. Anyway, bikers can tell me what they think about those overtaking manoeuvres, because both the overtaking riders thought, well, I was up the inside and, I'd done the job. But it seems like the expert analysts, James and James, the two James, or Jamie and James, didn't agree.
Okay. Let's go across the pond to some explosive action in NASCAR.
It was explosive. I mean, this is another thing that amazes me in motorsport. The tyres in NASCAR, the three leaders. I mean, there were three of them were out leading. Kevin Harvick was leading. Chase Elliott was leading. He was a points leader in their playoff system. And Martin Truex was leading. When they had a rear right tyre explode, I think 150 miles an hour, and suddenly you're opposite lock and just slamming the wall. And Elliott's car caught fire where the front wheel had been ripped off. And they all take it. Imagine any other motorsport where the tyres kept blowing. Formula One, they'd be on strike and they wouldn't race. They'd be blaming, as they used to blame Pirelli,
Yeah, they did.
But the point is that NASCAR drivers do what the Grand Prix drivers used to do, Pirellis, is they lower the pressures, they go as daringly low as they can, they put more camber on, because if you stress the tyre more, you can go faster. So I think all the teams know in NASCAR, that's the game. We're going to push our settings. We know we might risk the tyre, and they're prepared to do the risk. So when the tyre blows and they hit the wall, they don't go moaning like mad to Goodyear that the tyres aren't good enough. And obviously Goodyear, Barris Biden will obviously try to make the tyres better. But there were some big shunts with tyres blowing. Tyler Reddick,
what was that whole 2005, the US Grand Prix, that whole scandal with the Bridgestone tyres?
That was the thing. Yeah, the tyres were blowing. So, and why they didn't let them put a chicane in? I mean, the FIA, I don't know who stopped the chicane history-wise, whether it was the FIA or whether it was Pirelli. Whoever tyres lasted was on the grid. They said, we'll put a temporary chicane in before, because it was going around the turn one of the IndyCar track backwards with a concrete wall, flat out. The tyres are blown. So there was an offer of putting a temporary chicane in. I think the FIA said you can't do that because the track will no longer be homologated for insurance reasons if you put a temporary chicane in, because that's not how the track was certified as. Anyway, Christopher Bell was another one who's in the playoffs who hit the wall with a tyre blow. Tyler Reddick, though, who was put out of the playoffs because he had a tyre blow in the last race, so he's no longer in the championship hunt. He actually won the race with a really good run. So he's out of the playoffs. The playoffs are now, it's going to be cut to just 8 after the next 2 rounds. And Elliott, who was leading, is now 8. So Elliott's on the cut line. There's only 2 more races before it gets cut down to from 12 to 8. The next race is Talladega, baby, where anyone can win and anyone can lose. So it's a complete lottery. So the people who have got a few points up the front, I think Joe Logano now leads the 8, the 12 of the top 8. He could risk being taken out in Talladega, but the others can't. They're going to need to score points before the last round, which is at the last of this 3 is at the Roval, which is a road course inside the oval at some place. Forget where the Roval is. So lots of drama. I mean, it is fascinating, these playoffs. It builds the tension. Because, some drivers need to play a bit safe, need to make sure they get the points, But if you win it, you're straight through. So it's that gamble. If you win it, you're into the next group. So I like NASCAR. I know you're not convinced still, but Talladega is always worth watching because there will be a massive 200-mile-an-hour crash. And it's just, as I keep on liking it, if you haven't listened, you're bored. If you actually listen to the podcast till the end every time, you'll already know I liken it to sitting on the motorway when there's 3 lanes all doing 2 miles an hour. One lane goes 1 mile an hour faster. You want to move into that lane, and they're doing this, but they're doing it at 201 miles an hour.
I love doing that with you when we're in traffic. We're going somewhere and watching you, and you just
there's another lane.
I can get half a car length if I go in this lane. And
but the best bit in NASCAR at 202, you're allowed to push the car in front of you that's doing 201. Imagine we could do that on motorways. Come on, mate, let's push up a bit. Come on.
I would like to do that a few times. I'd also like to say. Hello to Thomas and Lewis Hodge from Australia. We got some Australian listeners.
Hello, Thomas and Lewis.
They're brothers, actually. So they both listen to the podcast. The younger one had to be told who you were. Lots of the younger generation aren't familiar.
Never tell me that.
As soon as they know who you are, they know. Then they recognise your voice.
Apologise to them that we don't do Aussie supercars because it's the most brilliant touring car series. But it is just a national series and there's no British drivers, riders in it. And sorry, we don't do it soon. And it happens in the middle of the night in England. Okay. So I don't get to watch enough.
Have you raced at Bathurst? Remind me.
No, I haven't raced at Bathurst. I wish I had.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'd love to drive around it. When we're on our next series and we've got a bigger budget, we will be going to Bathurst for some driving round it somehow. We'll find an excuse to go to Bathurst.
Okay. Also down under, next weque we got WRC going to New Zealand.
Yeah.
A bit closer to home, we got British Superbikes in Donington. That was this next week, not this week, as I thought. Moto GP goes to Thailand. And then
they continue.
Of course, got Formula
Japan.
1 back in Formula 1's in Singapore, the night race.
Yeah, with the W Series.
Yes.
I've gone off W Series big time recently because I'm getting bored. Well, I'm getting bored with the fact they won't let the ladies out. Apparently, I've found out now they're almost contracted so that they can't go in single-seater race without permission. They had their own women's-only Formula 3 test. And there was a big Formula 3 test last week. About 40 drivers all went down there to some track. And there's no women in it. None of the W Series drivers were even in the test.
That annoyed me.
They're so protective now about, Jamie Chadwick being 21st or 23rd. But if we keep on keeping them closeted, taking them around the world, this wonderful opportunity. I mean, racing in Singapore, all the young men would love to do that.
It's an absolute Mickey take out of these amazing male drivers. A driver's a driver. And if you have a women-only series, if we had a men-only series, it would be uproar. But and then now everyone's going to correct me and say, well, there's no women in Formula 1, but there could be women in Formula 1. It's not exclusive to women. It's just.
By the way, everybody, Jamie Chadwick does not
ability.
Want to do Formula 3. All you women out there on Twitter saying, why hasn't she got a Formula 3 drive? It's a disgrace. She has a fairly wealthy family. She's won $1 million. She could easily get into Formula 3. But what do you think she wants to do? Would you like another season in W Series, racing around the world, winning races, adored by everybody? Or do you want to go and finish 22nd and 23rd and 19th in a Formula 3 race? I'm quite sure. She's doing this test in Indy Lights, which I don't know when that's happening, but I think that's more of a PR stunt than a real ambition.
Yeah.
I'll wait and see. I may be proved wrong. I'd happily be proved wrong.
I would love to be proven wrong, but sadly, it's just there are much more talented men at the moment than there are ladies. That's the way it is. That's
as long as they're inspiring the ladies to have a go, and we will find, as I keep on saying, Maxine Verstappen and Louisa Hamilton one day.
Well, Jamie's amazing. She's a phenomenal driver. Yeah. Literally one of the best drivers.
She's a great ambassador. She's a great ambassador for women's racing. But let's stop pretending they're going to be Grand Prix drivers. They're not. Yeah, not any of the current grid.
That's a better way to sum it up than how I summed it up, saying they're just not good enough, because they're clearly exceptionally good. Whilst I try and dig myself out of that hole, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week for a ram-packed week, for W Series next week in Singapore, and all the other stuff like Formula 1 and stuff that's not so important as that. So we'll see you next week.
Cheers all.
Cheers.